My Android app now has the code that's needed to display the current location, but only when the user requests it. But it's also possible to set up a recurring location check that requests the location periodically and then reports it back through something called a location listener. I'm working in a project named Location Listener now, and I'm going to add code to create the listener object and then set it up. I'll start at the top of the main activity class, and I'll add a new field here. It'll be private, and it'll be an implementation of an interface called Location Listener. Notice that there are a couple of interfaces with this name. Be sure to choose this one from the package com.google.android.gms.location, and I'll name it Listener. Now I'm going to implement the object, and I'll add the code for this toward the bottom of this class in the onConnected method. Remember that this method is called when you successfully connect to the location service. Within the method, I'll initialize the mListener variable, and I'll use new and then the location listener constructor method. But because location listener is an interface and not a class, that results in implementing the method onLocationChanged. And this method will be called automatically each time you send out a request and a new location comes back. I'll finish up this statement with a semicolon at the end, and then I'll add the code that will be executed when my location changes. The method receives an instance of the location class. And so first, I'll report the location to the user using a toast message. I'll use toast.makeText, and instead of just passing in this, I need to pass in mainActivity.this. This right now would be the listener object, and I'd need to walk up the tree to the main activity object. That's the context of the message. Next, I'll pass in a message of location changed, and then I'll append the latitude and longitude to that. I'll get those values from the location object with location.getLatitude, and then I'll append a comma and a space, and then location.getLongitude. Then I'll add the duration of the message with toast.lengthShort, and then after I've created the message, I'll show it. Then I'll change the map. I'll use my existing method goToLocation, and then once again I'll pass in the latitude and longitude. I'll just copy and paste those values. And then I'll pass in a zoom value of 15. I'll modify this code to make it match what this method is looking for. So I'm reporting the information to the user using a toast message and changing what the map is showing. Next, I need to set up my request. I'm going to use a class named LocationRequest. And I'll name the object request, and I'll instantiate it with the method LocationRequest.create. Next, I need to change certain properties of the request object. First, I'll set its priority. I'll call request.setPriority, and I'll use a constant of this class. I'll choose location request and type in the period. And here are the priorities: high accuracy, balanced power accuracy, low power, and no power. Check the documentation for how these are supposed to be used, but you can guess that low power would conserve battery and high accuracy would tell you more accurately where you are. For this demonstration, I'll choose high accuracy, although for a production app, I might choose a priority that uses less battery power. Next, I'll set the interval, the amount of time between requests. I'll say request.setInterval. Pass in the interval in milliseconds. So a value of 5,000 would be 5 seconds. And then I'll also call a method called setFastestInterval, and I'll set that to 1,000. Now again, in a production app, I wouldn't be this aggressive. In fact, Google recommends that for a production app, you consider looking for the nearest location only every minute or so. That would be a value of 60,000. I'm using 5 seconds, though, just for this demo. So now I've created my request object, and I'm ready to register it. And for that, I'll call a method named requestLocationUpdates. It looks like this. I'll start with location services, and from there I'll call fused location API, and then request location updates. There are a number of versions of this method. I'll use the one that looks for a Google API client, a location request, and a location listener. And I'll pass those values in here. First is my client, mLocation client, then my request object, which I just created, and finally my listener, which I called mListener. And now, when I connect, I'll start my requests immediately, and I'll run the code. When the app opens, I almost immediately switch to my current location, and I start seeing periodic toast messages. Each time a new location is reported, I see that information on the screen. Now, I'm not moving around, so my map isn't changing. But if I were running this app and driving around a little bit, the map would be changing at the same time. Now, here's something you need to know about. I'm going to exit the app by pressing the device's back button. And notice that in the background, my location requests are keeping on happening. And this is something that will happen if you don't explicitly turn off your requests. So I'll go back to my code, and I'll add a little bit more code. When the user tries to exit the app simply by pressing the back button on the device, that'll cause the lifecycle method onPause to be fired. So I'll override that method. I'll type in the beginning of the method name, and then select it, and then after the call to the superclasses method, I'll once again use the fused location API. And this time my code will be location services.fusedLocationAPI and then .remove location updates. And this time I'll once again need to pass in my client reference and my listener reference. This is why I set these up as fields that would persist for the lifetime of the activity. So as I did before, I'll pass in mLocation client and mListener. And now, when the user exits the app, that'll turn off the requests. I'll run the app again. So when the app opens, once again, the location requests are launched. But now I'll exit the app by pressing the device's back button and then wait a few seconds. And I don't get any more requests. And if I look up at the notifications area, I see that the GPS icon has gone away. So I'm no longer burning battery power, and my app is behaving much more reasonably. So that's a look at how to use the Fused Location API to set up a stream of location updates, and how to use a location listener to handle those updates when they're received.